All right, let's kick off another deep dive. Today, we're going to try to figure out what a second Trump term might actually mean for the U.S. auto industry. It's going to be a wild ride because we're not just talking about like what cars we'll be driving in a few years, but also about economics and environmental policies and global politics. Like it's all kind of mixed together, you know. We're going to be using this report from Fleet Mobility today. So the main thing we're looking at for this deep dive is this article called Trump is Back, But What Now? Auto Industry. And to help us break it all down, we've got our expert here with us.
Thanks for having me.
So I think one of the biggest questions on everyone's mind is what's going to happen to emissions regulations, right? Trump hasn't exactly been a champion for climate change action in the past. So where do you think things are headed during his second term?
Well, it's tricky because the thing is, even now, the U.S. regulations on emissions are kind of all over the place. You've got the EPA setting standards at the federal level, but then you've got states like California and New York doing their own thing. They're going way further, actually.
Oh, right. Yeah. Didn't they like ban gasoline cars or something?
Yeah, they actually banned the sale of all new gasoline-powered cars and pickups by 2035.
Wow. So wait. Does that mean that, like, in a few years, someone in California won't be able to buy the same car as someone in Texas? How are car companies even supposed to deal with that?
It's a huge challenge for them. They basically have to choose between making different vehicles for different markets, or they try to meet those stricter standards everywhere, which could get really expensive.
And, I mean, what about the people buying the cars, right? It sounds like where you live could actually determine what kind of car you can even get.
Yeah, for sure. And there could be some weird side effects too. Think about the used car market, for example. If California and New York are basically banning gas-powered vehicles, people in those states might start selling their old cars to people in neighboring states. So you might see a sudden surge in used car sales in places that aren't even pushing for zero-emission vehicles.
So even if you're not in one of those states that's really going all in on these zero-emission vehicles, which, just to clarify for our listeners, that means vehicles that don't have any tailpipe emissions, you could still feel the impact of these policies.
Absolutely. And we're probably going to see price increases pretty much everywhere because, manufacturers are going to have to invest in new technology and new production lines to meet all these different standards. And those costs are going to get passed down to the consumer.
Makes sense. Okay, so speaking of costs, let's talk about electric cars. Right now, there's a $7,500 federal tax credit for people who buy electric vehicles. But it's not really clear where Trump stands on this. Do you think he'll keep it or get rid of it or what?
That's the big question. I mean, Trump has usually favored the traditional energy industries like oil and gas. So getting rid of that tax credit would definitely be good for them. And it might make electric vehicles less attractive to buyers, which could slow down their adoption.
But wouldn't getting rid of the tax credit also make the U.S. less competitive globally, especially now with everyone pushing for zero-emission vehicles?
Yeah, that's a valid point.
Yeah.
There's a strong argument to be made that the U.S. needs to be leading the way in this transition to cleaner vehicles. And keeping the tax credit could be a big part of that. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out for sure.
All right, so on top of all that, there's also the USMCA trade agreement, which, just to remind everyone, that's been in place since 2020. And it basically says that 75% of a vehicle's parts have to be made in North America if they want to avoid tariffs.
Right. The idea was to encourage manufacturing and create jobs in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. But the thing is, Chinese automakers have found a loophole. They're setting up factories in Mexico.
So they're basically using Mexico as a way to get into the U.S. market without paying those tariffs?
Exactly.
Pretty clever.
Yeah, it is. And keep in mind, the USMCA covers a huge amount of trade, over $1 trillion a year between the three countries. But there's another twist. Remember those tariffs Trump talked about during his first term? Well, it seems like he might be thinking about bringing them back.
Oh.
And this time, they could be even bigger. We're talking 25% on all vehicles imported from Mexico and Canada, plus another 10% on top of that for Chinese imports.
Wow. I'm already feeling sorry for anyone trying to buy a car in the next few years. But seriously, wouldn't that just make cars way more expensive for American buyers?
That's definitely a concern. And it's not just about new car prices either. This could have a ripple effect on the entire economy, maybe even lead to higher inflation across the board. Because, even if a car is assembled in the U.S., a lot of the parts might come from Mexico or Canada. So those extra costs are going to impact everyone's wallets.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it seems like no matter where these cars are being built or what kind of engine they have, consumers are probably going to feel the effects of these policies in their bank accounts.
It's really hard to imagine a scenario where these tariffs wouldn't lead to higher prices, at least in the short term. And then there's the possibility that Mexico and Canada will retaliate. They could easily impose their own tariffs, which could turn into a full-blown trade war.
What does all this mean for American car companies? I mean, aren't they supposed to be the ones who benefit from these America First policies?
Well, it's not that straightforward. A lot of American car companies actually have factories in Mexico and Canada. For some of them, a big chunk of their production happens outside the U.S., so they could end up getting hurt by these tariffs.
I guess that's the nature of the beast, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the long-term consequences of all this. What kind of legacy could a second Trump term actually leave on the U.S. auto industry?
Well, one thing that could happen is that these protectionist policies, they could actually backfire.
Backfire? How so?
Well, if American car companies become too reliant on just selling cars in the U.S.,
Right.
they might lose their edge in the global market.
Makes sense.
But there's also a chance that all this could actually force the industry to change and innovate faster.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, the pressure from those tariffs and the stricter emission standards, it could actually speed up the shift to electric vehicles and more sustainable manufacturing.
So in a way, this could be like a turning point for the whole auto industry.
Yeah, it's possible. If American companies step up and embrace these changes, they could become the leaders in this new era of transportation.
Okay, so that's a bit more optimistic.
It is.
But I'm curious, what about the people buying the cars? You know, we've been talking a lot about policies and economics, but in the end, it's the consumers who decide which cars succeed and which ones fail.
You're absolutely right. And we're already seeing some shifts in what consumers want.
Like what?
Well, people are more interested in fuel-efficient vehicles now.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And they want advanced safety features.
Makes sense.
And connected car technologies, things like that. It really depends on a lot of things, like price, availability, and I think most importantly, perception.
Perception.
Yeah, like if people see electric vehicles as unreliable or inconvenient or too expensive, they're not going to buy them, no matter how much the government tries to push them.
Makes sense.
So it's super important for car companies to not just make innovative products,
Right.
but also to really communicate the benefits of those products to the people buying them.
Yeah, so it's about like telling a good story, right? Building trust, creating excitement around these new technologies.
Exactly. It's not just about selling cars, it's about selling a vision of the future.
That's a great way to put it. So it sounds like the future of the U.S. auto industry depends on a whole bunch of factors, right? Consumer demand, government policies, global competition, and how willing car companies are to embrace these new ideas.
That's a pretty good summary.
It's a pretty wild time to be following this industry, that's for sure.
It is.
Like, we're at a crossroads, and whatever path we choose is going to have huge consequences for years to come. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
I think I'd say this. The future of the U.S. auto industry is definitely uncertain, but it's also full of exciting possibilities. The choices we make today are going to determine what kind of cars we'll be driving tomorrow. So stay informed, stay engaged, and make your voice heard.
I love that. That's great advice. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's been a fascinating conversation. All right, everyone, that's it for today. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.